I'm 29, and my name's Tyler. Thanksgiving has always been a weird holiday for my family, like a performance we all pretend to enjoy while silently checking our watches and counting down the minutes until we can leave. But this year felt colder, more pointed. I'd had a rough couple of years, quiet ones. I lost my job during the layoffs, moved into a smaller apartment, took contract gigs to stay afloat. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Kayla, was being paraded around like the second coming of Einstein because she landed a job in public relations at some tech firm and posted a perfectly filtered life on Instagram. My parents adored it, ate it up like it was gospel. But I never expected them to be so blatant about it. When I showed up at their house this year, something was already off. The porch light was dimmed, and no one answered the door for a good minute. When it finally creaked open, my mom stood there, wine glass in hand, wearing one of those overly festive sweaters she probably bought just to look cute in family photos. "Oh, you came," she said, blinking as if I'd RSVP'd no. No hug, no smile, just those three words, said flat like an afterthought. I stepped in, carrying the pie I'd made, and she barely glanced at it before muttering, "There's already dessert." I walked into the dining room and paused. The table was set for 10, 9 chairs filled, one spot left, but no place setting. Just an empty space at the corner by the window, where the light didn't quite reach. I waited for someone to notice. No one did. My sister waved from across the room, all bubbly and loud, her fiancé beside her already deep in conversation with my uncle. My dad gave me a brief nod from the kitchen, but otherwise, I was invisible. I placed the pie awkwardly on the counter and went to sit in the living room. Alone. Dinner was called an hour later. Everyone filed in. Laughter echoed, plates clinked, and I stood at the back, waiting to see where I should sit. Finally, I just pulled a stool from the bar and rolled it up near the end of the table. Nobody protested. They just let it happen. Halfway through dinner, the wine was flowing a little too freely, and that's when it started. My mom stood up, glass raised, and called for attention. "I just want to say how proud I am this year," she said, her voice already thick from wine and self-importance. "There's nothing more meaningful than watching your child flourish. So let's toast to the only child who actually made us proud." I swear, for a split second, the world stopped spinning. The air in the room tightened like a noose. Forks paused midair. Then every head turned to Kayla. And they clapped. They clapped like this was a rehearsal, and they all knew their parts. My sister beamed, like she'd just won an Oscar. Even her fiancé stood to clap. My mom smiled at her like she was royalty, and my aunt even whispered, "She really is the gem of this family." My hands were cold. I hadn't touched my food. I looked at the untouched plate in front of me. Cornbread stuffing, mashed potatoes, turkey I didn't even want. Something in me cracked, but it didn't burst. It was quieter than that, more deliberate. I pushed back the stool, stood up, and the scrape of metal against wood caught a few glances. I looked down the table, heart thudding in my chest. "Thanks for finally saying it out loud," I said. That's when my dad, who hadn't spoken much all night, set his glass down hard enough to make it clink and said, "Wait, tell them what you did." I froze. Everyone turned. My mom's smile faltered. Kayla looked confused. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Kayla asked, her voice all sugar and silk. My dad leaned back in his chair and stared at me, not angrily, just waiting. And in that moment, I felt every eye lock onto me like I was holding a grenade. I didn't plan for that night to become what it did. I just wanted to eat, maybe force a few civil words, then go home and drown myself in leftover pie. But apparently, that wasn't in the cards. Not after what I had done, and not after what they were about to learn. I hadn't told anyone in the family yet, not even my dad, I thought. I didn't expect him to know, but clearly he did. And now he was forcing my hand. I glanced at him. He gave the slightest nod, the kind only a father could give, one part push, one part permission. I turned to the room, my throat tight. My sister stared at me like I was about to ruin her big moment. So I took a breath, looked at the table full of people who had just clapped at my humiliation, and said, "All right, you want to know? Fine." I looked down at my hands for a moment. They were shaking, not with fear, but something heavier. Years of silence and swallowing pride rising to the surface like bile. I took another breath, leveled my gaze across the table, and said, "You all want to toast to Kayla? Fine. But maybe toast to me first, because I'm the reason she even got that job." The room went quiet. Like, real quiet. You could hear the ceiling fan buzz. Kayla scoffed. What are you talking about? I smiled, not because I thought it was funny, but because I couldn't believe I was finally saying it. Your company had a hiring freeze. They weren't accepting any more applicants. So when you begged me to review your resume, I didn't just clean up your grammar. I sent it to someone I knew in HR, someone who owed me a favor. I pulled strings, called in a personal reference, and they made an exception. That's how you got the interview. Not because you were better, because I handed you the opportunity. My mom narrowed her eyes. That's not true. Kayla had plenty of qualifications. She majored in art history and couldn't explain what PR stood for in her cover letter. I cut in, voice steady. You think they just saw her resume in a pile and said, let's give this random person a chance during a hiring freeze? No, I handed it to someone I mentored 2 years ago. The same company you all act like I've never been connected to. My sister's face went pale. Her fiancé leaned back like he was watching a drama unfold. My uncle shifted awkwardly in his seat, chewing slower. No one clapped now. My dad stayed silent, just watching. Kayla spoke, quieter now. You never told me that. Yeah, I said, shrugging. Because I didn't need credit. I thought, maybe for once, I could just do the right thing without making it a competition. My mom's lip curled. So what? You want a medal for that? You're bitter because we recognized your sister? No, I replied calmly. I'm bitter because you've never once even seen me. I could feel it bubbling out now, years of it. You remember when I won that coding competition in high school? National level. Got flown out to DC. You told everyone it was cute that I was good with computers. Kayla got a participation award in middle school, and you threw her a pizza party. When I graduated college a year early, with honors, you asked if I was sure the ceremony was worth going to. But when Kayla finished a 6-week online course and posted it to Instagram, you printed the certificate and framed it. I paused. The words came easier now, but each one still stung on the way out. When I helped you refinance the house after Dad's accident, you said, "You're so good with numbers," like I was a calculator. I saved you thousands. Did you ever say thank you? My mom crossed her arms, face hardening. You always make everything about yourself. I laughed bitterly. No, you just make sure everything isn't about me. Big difference. Kayla looked down, then back up. I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't tell them to toast to me. No, I said, but you soaked it in like you earned it. You let it happen. You always do. The room was still dead silent. Even the younger cousins had stopped fidgeting. I turned to my dad. You really want me to tell them everything? He nodded once. They should know. I glanced around the table again. All right, I said, quieter this time. This is the last Thanksgiving I'll ever spend here. And before I go, I want you all to understand why. My aunt opened her mouth like she was about to interject, but my dad cut in. Let him speak. I looked at my mother. Do you remember a few months ago when you got that letter from the IRS about a pending lien on the house? And then, a week later, it magically resolved itself and you got a notice saying the case was closed? You said it was a clerical error. That God must have been looking out for you. She blinked, then frowned. That was me, I said. I paid it off. Quietly. Because I didn't want Dad to lose the house over something that wasn't even his fault. You didn't even ask questions. You just assumed the universe loved you. Kayla's eyes widened. Wait, that lien was real. Yeah, I said. And I used the last of my savings to clean it up. There was a long silence, and then my mom spoke again, her voice suddenly sharper. If you had that kind of money, why didn't you help out when Kayla needed her car repaired last month? I stared at her, stunned. That was the moment I realized it wasn't that they didn't understand. It's that they didn't care to. Kayla needed a car? That trumped a foreclosure? I had nothing left, I said. I used it all for you. My dad leaned forward and finally spoke again. Tyler's the one who bailed us out. Not some miracle. He sacrificed quietly, and I let him. I was too proud to admit we needed help, and he never rubbed it in. Until now. My mom just shook her head and stood up, muttering something about needing air. Kayla followed her out of the room, looking dazed. And then it was just me, my dad, and a room full of people who suddenly didn't know where to look. He stood up, walked over, and put a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have stepped in sooner. I nodded, but didn't speak. The emotion was building too fast now. My legs were already moving toward the door. I grabbed my coat from the hallway and stepped outside into the cold November air. And just as I reached the sidewalk, I heard the door creak open behind me and someone call my name. I turned. It was Kayla. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. And then she said something I never expected. Tyler, wait. Before you go, there's something I need to admit. I stood there, halfway between the porch and the street, feeling the cold sink through my jacket and into my bones. The kind of chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Kayla's voice cracked just enough for me to realize this wasn't some throwaway apology attempt. She was nervous, genuinely nervous. I turned, slowly. What do you need to admit? She didn't come down the steps right away. She just gripped the frame of the front door, like letting go of it would make her fall. Her eyes flicked toward the living room where everyone else still sat, awkward, silent, stunned. Then she looked back at me. I knew, she said. Those two words hit harder than I expected. I knew about the job, she went on. Not at first, but after I got the offer, I overheard a call between your friend in HR and her manager. They mentioned your name. I didn't say anything because I wanted to believe I earned it. I didn't say anything, just kept staring. I could feel something shifting in my chest. Not rage, not exactly. More like exhaustion soaked in disbelief. Kayla stepped down the first stair. I told myself it didn't matter. Like, the work was mine after I got it. But then Mom started acting like I was the golden child, and I didn't stop her. I let her believe I did it all on my own. I gave a bitter laugh. You didn't just let her. You soaked it up like sunshine. You let her act like I was the failure, and you were the one who made it. I know, she said quietly. I'm not proud of it. I shook my head, trying to gather my thoughts. You could have said something anytime. Any of the 20 times she threw me under the bus just to praise you. Kayla came down one more step. I was afraid that if I told them the truth, they'd just stop seeing me as special. Welcome to my entire childhood. I shot back, a little sharper than I intended. She flinched. And for once, I saw something raw behind her carefully curated smiles and social media filters. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was regret, and maybe something even deeper. Shame. I'm sorry, she said. I really am. But that's not all. I frowned. What else? She hesitated, like she was weighing whether or not to say it. Then, finally, she stepped all the way down to the path and walked up to me, hands buried in her sleeves. Last year, when Dad got hurt and you offered to help with the refinancing, Mom told me not to let you. I blinked. What? She said it would be a mistake to let you take over anything, that you'd just use it to hold something over us. So when you offered to help, she asked me to talk you out of it. I remembered that conversation, how Kayla had said, maybe you should just let them handle it. You've got enough going on. I thought she was just trying to be considerate. Turns out, it was more like manipulation dressed in concern. I didn't want to, she added quickly. But she pushed. And honestly, I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. But I did, I said, voice low. I went through with it. I spent everything I had. I know, she said. And it's eating me alive. We stood there in silence for a moment. I could hear laughter again through the window, nervous, forced. Maybe someone had made a bad joke to cut the tension. Probably my uncle, who always treated conflict like it was a sitcom. I stared at Kayla. I saw the girl I'd grown up with. The one who used to sneak into my room when she was scared of the dark. The one who used to call me her hero when we were kids. And now, I saw the woman who stood by while our mom erased me one Thanksgiving at a time. I needed you to know, she whispered, that I'm not proud of who I've become around them. I nodded, slowly. Thanks. But knowing it doesn't change anything. I figured, she said, looking down. I turned to go. But then her voice came again, small, almost like a child's. There's one more thing. I stopped. She looked up, lips trembling. I think Mom is trying to sell the house. I turned back. What? She's been talking to a realtor behind Dad's back. She wants to downsize, says it's too much to maintain. But that's not why. Then why? She wants the cash. And she said, if she sells it before the new year, she doesn't have to list Dad on the paperwork. Because the deed's still in her name. She's planning to sell it and move in with Aunt Linda. Dad doesn't even know. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. She said he'll be fine in a condo, Kayla added. But she didn't mention giving him a choice. My hands clenched into fists. She was going to blindside him. Kayla nodded. She told me not to say anything. But after tonight, I just couldn't keep it quiet anymore. The front door opened again, and we both turned. It was my dad. He stood on the porch, silent for a moment, then said, you should both come back inside. There's something I want to say. To everyone. Kayla looked at me, unsure. And I I had no idea what he was about to do, but something told me it was going to be big. I didn't move at first. The front door was open, my dad standing there like a shadow cutting across the porch light, but my legs stayed rooted to the pavement. Part of me wanted to keep walking, to let them all sit in the wreckage of their own making. But then I glanced at Kayla. Her expression wasn't defensive or smug or even expectant. It was the kind of look that said, "This is going to hurt, but I'll stand here with you anyway." So I followed my dad back inside. The dining room had gone eerily quiet. Conversations had died off, the laughter replaced by the thick, awkward silence of people trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed a family implosion. My mom sat at the head of the table, glass in hand again, looking irritated more than anything. Not guilty, not reflective, just annoyed. My aunt and uncle were whispering about something between sips of wine. Kayla and I stepped into the room like unwanted guests crashing a party, which, ironically, described most of my holidays since I turned 21. My dad didn't sit. He stood at the center of the table, looking everyone in the eye before finally speaking. "I've made a lot of mistakes as a father," he began. "More than I probably even realize. But the biggest one was letting this family pretend that being loud meant being right. That silence was guilt. That the one who doesn't ask for attention doesn't need it." He looked at me. I've stood by and watched as Tyler's been treated like a ghost. Like his accomplishments were somehow less important because he didn't post about them or wrap them in a bow. And I didn't speak up. I let my silence become permission. My mother rolled her eyes and muttered, "Oh, come on." "No, you come on," my dad snapped, voice rising for the first time in years. "You stood there and made a toast to only one of our kids. You knew what you were doing. Don't act like it was innocent." She went quiet, lips thinning. He continued, voice calmer now. "When Tyler was a teenager, he used to stay up late helping me figure out our taxes because I couldn't afford an accountant. When I threw out my back and couldn't work, he took side jobs to help with groceries. He was 18, and when the IRS almost took our house, he paid it off. Without fanfare, without asking for thanks. Because that's the kind of man he is." A ripple of murmurs moved through the table. A few people looked genuinely shocked. And while we were busy clapping for Kayla, my dad said, glancing at her briefly, we were ignoring the person who was holding this family together behind the scenes. Kayla looked down, ashamed. Then my dad turned to my mom again. "And now I find out you're trying to sell the house behind my back? After everything he did to save it." My mother's head snapped up. "Who told you that?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. She scoffed, rising from her chair. "It's not like I was just going to take the money and run. I was planning to help you. I've been managing this house for years while you've been working yourself into the ground. You were going to move in with Linda," he said, voice shaking. "And leave me where? In a condo you didn't even discuss with me? You made that decision for both of us. You don't understand how exhausting it is." "No," he interrupted. "You don't understand. You don't understand what it means to build something and watch your own family try to tear it down from the inside." My mom folded her arms, face flushed with anger, but she didn't speak. My dad turned back to me. "Tyler, I know I can't undo all the times I didn't defend you, but I see you now. I really do." Something caught in my throat, and for the first time that night, I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. That was enough. But he wasn't done. "I'm making this right," he said, and pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. "I've been talking to our lawyer. I added you to the deed." Gasps from around the table. "Starting next month," he said, "you and I will co-own the house. If something happens to me, the mortgage is yours, but it'll be fully paid off. It's not about the money. It's about the fact that you deserve to have something to show for everything you've sacrificed. And no one is going to take that away from you." My mom stood up, voice trembling with rage. "You can't do that without my—" "Actually," he said, holding up another sheet of paper, "I can. Because the original refinancing we did, you signed your rights over to me as sole trustee. You just didn't read the fine print. And since then, I've had full control. So yes, I can." The color drained from her face. "Now sit down," he said coldly. "You've said enough for one night." And she did. Not because she agreed, but because, for the first time ever, she realized she was out of moves. Kayla looked at me with a mix of guilt and something else, admiration, maybe, or all. Like she'd just realized the quiet brother she'd taken for granted had been playing 4D chess, while the rest of them were still learning checkers. I didn't say much after that. I didn't need to. The silence around the table said it all. Eventually, people started to leave. Quietly. No goodbyes, no hugs. Just the sound of coats rustling and doors opening and closing. Kayla stayed back to help clear the dishes. My dad poured himself a fresh glass of wine and offered me one. I took it. As we stood in the kitchen, Kayla approached me with 2 cups of coffee and handed me one. I don't know if I can fix all of this, she said, but I want to try. And not because I feel guilty. Okay, maybe a little because of that, but mostly because I miss having a real brother. Not just the idea of one. I raised my coffee. We'll see. She smiled sadly. Fair. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But we weren't on opposite sides of the table anymore, either. As I left that night, I looked back at the house. It still looked the same, weathered, familiar, full of history. But something had shifted. For the first time, it felt like mine. Not because I was on the deed, but because I had finally reclaimed the space they'd tried to push me out of. The place I'd quietly protected for years. The next day, I got a text from my cousin I hadn't spoken to all night. It read, "We were all wrong about you. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a minute before replying. Don't be sorry. Just be better. And with that, I put my phone away, made myself breakfast in my tiny apartment, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride. Not vindication. Peace. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for an apology and start writing your own ending. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.